So Blaine, I got you here. We've talking about safety, and now I want to talk to you about the new buzzword, or not so much new, but it seems like it gets kind of rehashed. No pun intended. Every couple years. But what's your thoughts on repurposing?
Repurposing content.
Repurposing content,
Content.
especially as it pertains to what we were talking about, kind of off.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were talking about this offline. What's funny is many years ago, right? Many years ago, I had an instructor tell me something. This was a fire instructor. So I was going through I don't know if y'all could see my goofy photos of my training fire. This was a captain who was a trainer, and she was telling me, this is way back then, and when I was going into prevention and education. She said, you've got to have the ability to speak at length on a particular, fires. This is in the context of fire safety, a fire safety topic. Like, you're going to put on a full blown class. Like, we're going to do a 3 day deep dive on like this particular topic. And you got to be able to do a 4 hour training session, and then you've got to be able to speak on parts of it like a 5 minute stand up type of situation. The same topic, like, you've got to be able to scale. So, really, what she was talking about was scaling, right? Content scaling. We call it repurposing, but it's really scaling is the way I think of it. And I've carried that with me throughout my career ever since then, ever since the mid 90s. I remember that was the approach I took to all the safety topics that I made sure that I learned and learned really well, because I want to be able to teach it. And when I taught at Sinclair College, I took this approach: teach it like you're doing a full blown class. If I got to do like a quick, like half day, 1 hour or whatever training session for a group of workers that are going to be impacted by this particular topic, I need to be able to scale it down to that. Or just do a 5 minute toolbox talk out on a job site about a particular aspect of it. And that's where you got to pick and choose what you're going to focus on. And what's funny is there's another part of this equation of being able to scale and repurpose this content, right? Take like just think when we think of social media, for example, with content creation, we think in terms of long form and short form, right? That's what we're talking about. Long form would be that full blown, I'm going to get into everything that you need to know about confined spaces. We're going to do a 3 day class from the standard, the permitting process, the rescue and rescue teams, and then simulations. Like, we're going to do the full thing, the whole thing, right, in 3 days or 5 days, whatever this class is. Then I also got to be able to just talk about to a very particular audience. Look, this maybe it's senior management that I need to get them to approve a budget for that training. I've got to be able to scale that conversation tailored to that audience as to why this is important, why confined spaces pose a particular risk to the company, and be able to quantify that risk for those decision makers to be able to get them to approve, right? Or after the training, I do a stand-up meeting with a group of maintenance workers who are about to go into a confined space that later that day. Maybe I just want to brief them on remind them on the importance of testing the air and monitoring that space, and with the attendant, and making sure I hit on that last minute type of things. Like, that's scaling, but that's also repurposing content. And I carried that with me through to the podcast and writing, articles, and of course now a book. I want to be able to take any topic, do a full blown book on it, break parts of that topic up into different episodes that are about an hour or less each. And then I want to be able to just write a blog post or a quick article about a particular piece of that. And so that's what we mean by like repurposing content. And like, that's the buzzword. But really, it's, if you think about it, you're scaling. It's just, you have to be able to scale. And in order to scale, you have to know your audience. You have to know who you're talking to. I Am I talking to the C-suite decision makers and I need them to approve a budget to tackle this problem? That I got to be able to scale that topic, that conversation to that audience. Am I talking to frontline workers that are faced with this issue every day and they've had the onboarding, but I need to keep it relevant and top of mind? So I'm going to use benefit language and use terms that they understand that are relevant for them that day, what they're going to be facing with. So I've got, as a safety professional, I have to be that flexible. I have to be able to scale. In order to do that, I got to know two things. I got to know the topic. I got to know my subject, right? Like the back of my hand. And I got to know my audience. I have to know who I'm talking to. And we'll throw a bonus because we're big on bonuses here, right? I have to know what I'm after. What change am I hoping to see or affect, or of what risk am I trying to avoid? And so you combine those things, you get your you get that ability to scale and be effective at it. And it's challenging, and I know I'm still learning it. My ripe middle age, I will just say that. But that's what we mean by repurposing today. I think we talk in terms of social media and content, but in the workplace, when it comes to our communications, especially with safety, it's about scaling. And we are repurposing that content. We're picking and choosing what to talk to, what to talk about, at what length, and what language we use for a particular audience to achieve a particular end. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. And, I've seen so many different incarnations of this, throughout my life. It goes as simple as, your mom, when you're growing up, you'd have, hamburger that she would make, and it would be hamburger the night that you ate it. But the next couple times it might, find its way into spaghetti. It might be in goulash. I mean, so our parents were repurposing back in the day. But, if you look at like a book as an example, you just wrote your book, I think about a gentleman that had a book called It's Not How Much You Make, It's How Much You Keep. And he would stand in front of the groups that he was talking to, and he would say, now, guys, this book is $20. Okay. And it's going to tell you every, tax code and all the different things that go along with working at home, and what a kind of a entrepreneurial tax code, is going to provide you so far as benefits. And it's great. You're going to love it. But if you'll just indulge me for a second, I want to tell you about another thing that I have, and that is my Behind the Book program. And the Behind the Book program, he went on for another 5 minutes and went on to tell us that, he on every Wednesday for, 5 weeks, and a sixth week, if you needed it, would go through soup to nuts and cover this book chapter by chapter by chapter, and give you all the nooks and crannies of this book, the insights, the reasons, the little extras, the things that he's discovered since writing the book, and all the different things. And it's $100. And I can tell you that I watched, people literally go from having a $20 bill in their hand to having a $100 bill, or, 5 20s. And the reason why is because I think that people need to have that extra, that they want to know that kind of long form way. So even he repurposed his book, in a way that took it, kind of above and beyond. And now if that same gentleman was, out there doing, which I think he's kind of fallen ill and may possibly have passed away, I'm not sure. But he would be doing probably a membership, on top of that, would do some sort of, private consulting, would maybe even bring in somebody to be a, it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep expert, like almost like a Dale Carnegie, or things like that, a trained group of people that will go out there and teach us stuff. But I think that, this repurposing idea, if you think about it, we're very much in a world where people tap their feet in front of a microwave, so you don't really have somebody that's interested in, number one, listening to a full book, or reading a full book. They may want that blurb that someone gives them. I can't tell you how many times I've seen it, where there's a page that, has a couple things highlighted, and it's almost like people feel like they've read that book, even though they haven't, so those little bite-sized versions of, being able to do stuff. I do it myself. I said to you earlier in a previous recording, you're more of a long form safety guy, where I'm more of a very quick, rapid fire, high level, safety tip guy. So even my stuff that I do is very much repurposed from, somebody that has, provided a much larger scale, bit of information, and I've given a very quick, hit to what it is. So it's something that is just absolutely prevalent in everything that we do. You just don't maybe notice that it's happening.
And we need all of those all of those approaches.
Absolutely.
That's the thing. People say, well, long form is better. Well, no, not necessarily. It's better for some people in some situations. I think you're absolutely right, and I think with social media, it really does encapsulate this. I don't like Twitter or whatever it's called now, only because of the brevity of it. It's too short for me. Where I would do like a YouTube or a podcast or Audible, right? Because I like the longer form. I like more information and context. Somebody explaining something or breaking something down in depth and detail for me, so that I can internalize it and I can then recognize when I'm in situations where I could recall some of those tools, some of those tips, some of that information, and apply it towards a problem I'm facing, right? That's just me, and it isn't better. Sometimes I hate it because I have to dive into it, and it takes an investment of my time. And to your point with the podcast, the articles, and I've really forced myself to work in those different domains, right? With the blog, the quick blog, and you might even see it on and this is not a shill, so I'm not going to name the site, but on my podcast site, the description of the episodes, like I toyed around for a while of like just all the show notes were there. I would just copy and paste transcribe all the show notes, very long form for people who wanted to read the whole thing or just listen. I've now just got it to where it's high level. This is what we're going to break down. Go here for more information if you want to learn more. And then like I've even forced myself to be short, a very, use brevity, right? Or whatever you want to call it, but be very concise and short. Use the podcast episode for the longer form. I have posts about it on social media that are little snippets or I'll clip an audio or a video clip that when you walk away, you still got something out of it, right? But maybe not the whole picture. And it's funny you mentioned the book and Audible. Like Audible, for example, is somebody's asking me like, hey, why don't you record an Audible? And I plan to, but here's what I plan to do it. How I plan to do it. I plan to repurpose the book into an Audible version. But instead of just reading chapter to chapter, just listening to somebody read the book to you, we're going to read the first chapter. And then I'm going to have a conversation with somebody between that chapter and the next one about what we just read. More context, more in depth, even more like a podcast almost in between each chapter. So it's going to be very much expanded. And again, it's another version of the book for a different type of audience. Should they seek that level and depth of information out, right? That's sort of what I want to do. So I'm even thinking, even beyond the book and beyond the podcast, I'm combining some of them to make something, even a new form, I guess, that I hadn't considered before. And it's all new to me. So I'm really having fun experimenting with it. But you're right. We've always been in this situation. We've always had this. We've maybe called it different things. And my captain, she said, you got to be able to scale. You got to be flexible. You might only get 5 minutes to impress upon somebody before they go hit the crew, like we would be on a scene in the engine on the way to a scene, and some information would come in. And I remember Lieutenant would turn around in the rig and go, hey, we just got word that there's 3 cars, not 2. So be sure you, like, real quick, we don't have a lot of time. So it's very tactical. versus being in the station and having a meeting where we talk about something versus being in a training session for half a day and talking about it. And you got to be able to scale and be flexible. And I think I'm learning how to do that more and more by playing in these different mediums, blog, podcast, writing a book, and of course, looking forward to Audible.
Well, I got three things for you. One, I want to give a plug for your podcast. It's the Safety Pro podcast. Blaine is just really a guy that when you follow, what he says, it is going to be not only information that you need, but it's information that's practical because he's been there and done that. He's got the background to prove it, so first and foremost, I want to, without a doubt, give credit where credit's due. But the second thing is, you talk about going through and having that podcast and how you used to do the show notes and whatnot. Another talk that we're going to have today that'll be on a separate recording is about AI and the uses of it. And now, what used to be a very arduous task of going through and, making sure that you have each topic covered with links, to be able to jump ahead. AI will do that for us now, so it will quite literally go through and take a podcast that you've done in long form and literally just title it out. Is it going to be perfect? No. It's not, because it's still being done by a machine. But I will tell you, it's getting better and better by the day. It's one of those things that it's learning, how to do it correctly. It knows, where to stop and start, and kind of it misses it on occasion, but it does a really good job. So the tools are definitely there, to do that. But the third thing is, if you are somebody that is, kind of, and AI actually bleeds into this as well. But if you're somebody that has kind of a writer's block, like what should I do today? Doing a long form podcast or a blog or anything, either audio or video or print. If you will take the time to go through and research a subject to the point that you have enough to where you can put in, let's say it's half hour to an hour of text, video, or audio, and then break it down backwards once you're complete, you really don't have to worry about what am I going to do this month? Because if you have that subject, you can go through. It's almost like you can't know where you're going until you know your destination. I mean, a plane doesn't take off and say, "Hey, we're just gonna land."
Which way do I point?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't work like that. They know that when they get in at Cincinnati, they're landing in Denver. Now there may be 1,000 adjustments that are made, but by either the pilots and or the machines between there, but they know where they're going. So if you say, okay, today the topic's going to be on lockout tagout, and you do an entire either print, video, and or audio altogether of that subject, and then you go and you find all the different images that go along with that, and you find all the different breaks that you want on that, you could probably sit down very easily and say, okay, this is going to be the month. This is going to be week 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. If there's 5 weeks, this is going to be each of those days, and you'll have all the images, the clips, everything, because then what you do is either by good old elbow grease, which I always talk about doing something in the form of shovel, blower, or plow. Okay, and what I mean by that is, sometimes when you start, you got to get the shovel out. You got to do it all yourself. Then you graduate to being able to use a blower, and then the last thing is a plow, which you have somebody else do it. There's 1,000 incarnations in between that, that can happen. But if you use that elbow grease and you do it yourself, it might take several days, to put together that month's work. But once you're done, you could quite literally, either in the form of doing it with auto posting and things like that, have your entire month completely planned. Or you could do the second thing, which is the blower, which is go through and have AI, various tools do it all for you, where it breaks it down, it makes the clips, it finds the images or creates the images in the form of something that goes out and I'm trying to think what it's called. I won't even pretend to tell you right now. It's missing me, but there's 1,000 of them out there that'll create images, and then
right, yeah,
and then
create little graphics and whatnot.
Exactly, and then the last thing is you hand off that piece of collateral, whether it's in the form of, like I said, a print, audio, and or video, to someone else, and they do it for you. So it's definitely something that you can do. And it is something that I think that when people think that they don't have that creative spark, the last thing, and kind of, if you will, the bonus is with AI now, you could quite literally go to AI and say, write a 45 minutes or how many words you think is in 45 minutes article about the lockout tagout process, and it's going to put together something that is extremely factual, and has a good flow and everything. You may have to go through and do a few tweaks, and I don't really suggest that you do that because it's kind of cheating, but you could do it. I mean,
we'll get into all of that. I've got my thoughts on that as well. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. But going back to your topic, like I've been podcasting since 2014. I'm never at a loss for something to talk about. Like I don't call it writer's block. I don't know what it is, but I can literally just open the OSHA CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, and just flip to a page and look down and go, oh, I can talk about that. That's a topic. I can. And lockout, tag out. Let's do a little exercise for everybody listening. If you're wanting to write an article, if you're wanting to start a podcast, if you want to, it doesn't matter what you want to do, right? Drop a post, something that's informative. You want to contribute something. You want to share your knowledge. And you're like, what do I talk about? Let's take lockout, tag out. Let's see if we can come up with 10 different pieces of content for lockout, tag out, right off the top of our head. You have lockout, tag out, an overview. There you go. You just name off and read like all the different sections or parts. You've got the training requirements. You have the written permit. You have monitoring of spaces. You have the attendant, the entrant, the actual confined space supervisor, right? You have rescue team. There's contractors. Like just overview. Then you could take every one of those components I laid out, and that's a separate piece of content, a separate episode, a separate post, a separate article or blog, right? I'm just going to focus on confined space entry attendance. And I can talk for 25, 30 minutes easy on just the roles and responsibility of the attendant. The confined space entry supervisor, what does that mean? They don't have to actually supervise workers. They just have to be somebody who supervises that activity, right? And then what does OSHA say about some of the duties of the supervisor? There's another piece of content. What about the entrance, right? What about combining the entrance and their responsibility, their role in the monitoring of the space? What about the attendant? All of it, just one piece of content focused solely on the attendant. What about contractors? What about rescue teams? In-house versus outside rescue? Which one's better? Pros and cons. There you go. You could go. I just named probably more than 10 pieces of content just in that topic alone. Fall protection, same thing. PPE, same thing. Like it's endless. You should never be without something to talk about or write about. Now, to your point, how I research and put stuff together, we have things that help us make that efficient. Some of it's not cheating. Because if you're thinking of the topic and you're saying, I know what I want to say, I'm just going to use some tools to help me say it a little more effectively. I'm a fan of Grammarly, right? Grammarly's got some AI built into it.
Yeah, it
Word,
does.
Microsoft Word has AI. It's called spell check. It's
Right.
artificial intelligence. So everybody who says AI is terrible, it's like, well, do you use word processor? Do you use a computer? Because you used to type that stuff out on a typewriter, and I don't see you banging away at the keys and taking this down to the printer and rolling off stuff and hanging it on telephone poles and passing your blog out on the corner street. No, you're on social media that has algorithms that put this in front of people that follow you or that have similar interests that you're writing about in it. That's AI. That's like, so there, but there's also on the other side people who cheat, who do what you said. Write me an article about this, and they just copy and paste it and put their name on it, and it's like they didn't even read it, and it sounds cheesy because you could spot it, right? You know, you could spot AI when you read it for the most part. So, so I'm really interested in that conversation. I think we probably let the cat out of the bag a little bit, but it's a good teaser.
Well, the thing is that if you have a passion or a knowledge of something, you probably will never get bored talking.
No.
Because it is something that you're going to have a proficiency in something. It may be something that only people that are interested in that subject are going to have any interest in. It might be specialized, or it might be a cause that somebody. I mean, you're not going to talk about veganism to somebody that's a cattle rancher. I mean, it's just they're going to be like, scram.
Well, you can, but it's a whole different conversation.
Exactly.
But that's a good example. That's a perfect example of scaling, of repurpose scaling. You can talk about veganism to a cattle rancher, but know your audience, and the conversation would be entirely different, right? I think it's a great example.
Yeah, and I think that's where that whole avatar thing comes in, which, by the way, AI will do as well. You can quite literally say, this is the person I want to talk to. They'll create an avatar that will literally be Joe Smith and tell you exactly how to talk to him, her, they, whatever.
In that context.
Exactly. So, but yeah, repurposing is one of those things that, I wanted to get your take on it, because every so often, and I've got books, piled up behind me, much higher than what you can see and much lower than what you can see. And, I find that it's funny. I have people like Harvey Mackay back there, and Joe Girard, the greatest salesman alive. Sorry about the dog, but it's one of those things that all this stuff just always comes back around in the form of it might be in the sense of like fashion. I see these platform shoes and bell bottoms. I didn't like wearing them in the 70s, as a kid, and now I see them coming back. Still don't like them. But
like you said, as a kid.
As a kid, I was, the gray has been earned, but I was rocking those stupid things, back in grade school. So it's one of those things.
Everything old is new again.
It always comes back around, and the thing is all people really have ever done is just regurgitate something, put a new pretty bow on it, and call it theirs. I mean, there really is no new information. I mean, it's just a bunch of rehashed stuff.
And every generation thinks, like, back in the 1800s, that generation thought they were at the cutting edge of technological advancement, right? And like the age of flight, the age of the invention of the automobile, every generation, and I can't remember what this phenomenon, if it's even the phenomenon has a name, but every generation thinks, like, I'm Gen X, man. Nobody remembers us. But my generation built the internet, so there you go. Blame us, blame the Gen Xers. But every generation does that. Don't you think that's funny?
Well, they absolutely do. And the other thing is that I can tell you, I'm not down at the library, digging through microfiche and printing them out, 10 cents a page. I'm going on the internet. I mean, you should embrace whatever it is that has been given to you. I mean, I think
it's how you use it. It's how you use it.
Exactly. So, well, I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and wrap up on this. We have a topic that we're going to be covering about AI that, we will do at another time. I will link that to this conversation. So if anybody is, wondering where the AI talk is, I'll make sure that when I put this out that we give you our thoughts on AI as well. But Blaine, I can't thank you enough, for your time and your take on repurposing.
Likewise, Wes. It's always always pleasure having these conversations with you. And you notice there's no script, there's no nothing. We didn't really plan it. We just said, "Hey, let's talk about this." All right, let's go. And that's what I love. I love these conversations,
and I love it too, my friend. So, well, I'll tell you what. Thank you very much, and as always, have a dynamite day, my friend.
Likewise.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.